Hello, we are in a very wet and grey Liverpool for the Labour Party conference. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has just spoken.
It falls to me and to our generation of Labour women to follow in the footsteps of those who went before us, to write the work of all women back into our economic story, to show our daughters and our granddaughters that they need place no ceiling on their ambitions. That is the Britain we're building. That is the Britain that I believe in. We're in government today because we changed our Labour Party and we now have the chance to change our country for the better. I will repay the trust that people put in us. Trust is hard-earned, but it's easily squandered. Just ask the Conservatives.
Now, she said this weekend that this speech was going to take on a note of positivity and optimism, a marked turn from the shadow of doom and gloom which has followed the Labour government over the past few weeks since it came to power, particularly after that announcement that 10 million pensioners would be losing their winter fuel allowance. Now, we all actually watched the speech from different places in this big complex at Liverpool. I was in the media pen. Rachel, you were in the overflow room.
I was in the overflow auditorium, which is a completely separate auditorium they have for people who really want to watch the speech in an auditorium setting, but sadly didn't start queuing an hour beforehand and didn't get into the main room.
So you're like the second division.
Yeah.
And Andrew Marr, our political editor, was in the conference hall.
Yeah.
Good for him. Now, you managed to speak to Andrew before I could get out of the crowds, and this is what he had to say.
Tell us, from the room where it happened, what are your reflections?
I thought this was an absolute belter of a speech, and I think what we have seen today is the emergence of a new leader in Britain, a new kind of leader, a slightly unsettling, unfamiliar, confident hybrid leader. I think we saw the arrival of the social democratic Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, that... very, very strong words. What was it in her speech that particularly stood out to you?
Well, these speeches are all about confidence and self-belief, and she just brimmed with it. You have never heard a senior minister give a more impassioned and forthright feminist analysis of politics and where she stands, talking about daughters and granddaughters looking up there in the years ahead. This was somebody who has arrived in the place she always thought she deserved to be. The use of the first person pronoun, I will do this, I, all the way through it. She had an absolutely unapologetic analysis of what was wrong with the economy and blamed the Conservatives for a lot and what she was going to do. But she also added the thing that we have not really heard from this government properly so far, which was hope, which was optimism. The kind of Britain she believed she could build, which was very, very Margaret Thatcher, a Britain that was going to build again, utterly self-confident, its place in the world, a new Britain. And it was, you can say it's cheesy, but after all the gloom and the mistakes and the errors of the last few weeks, it was what this party needed to hear. Final reflection from me is, what does it leave for Keir Starmer tomorrow?
I was wondering that. She was smiling, actually, while she gave the speech, which you could really hear in her voice.
It was a great big grin, wasn't it? And we haven't seen that from her as well.
No.
She has learned how to speak very, very quickly in a way we rarely see. That's why I say the emergence of a new leader. She was a leader before, but she's a different kind of leader. Higher status, more authority today.
No, you wrote for the New Statesman this week. You wrote, what's the story? And that Labour has to come up with a compelling narrative if it wants to turn around the kind of doom and gloom and its early hiccups. Do you think she was able to do that today?
It was almost as if she had read the New Statesman.
She does read the New Statesman.
Well, there you go, you see. So what we were saying is that growth is the absolute lodestar for this government. We know that, but you have to explain why growth. What is growth for? And I thought she did that rather brilliantly. Changing the metaphor, she kind of hovered over these islands, a bit like one of those CGI dragons you see on television. You know, all the seats that Labour won in different parts of the country, and then later on, all the sites where Labour economic development is going to change the landscape. And she was looking across the whole country. And that is what you see from a proper leader. That's not what you get from an ordinary Chancellor of the Exchequer's speech.
Very positive there from Andrew.
He was buzzing, wasn't he?
He was buzzing. I mean, he's always an optimist.
Yeah.
But it's really gone down well with him.
I wouldn't necessarily have called Rachel Reeves a CGI dragon, but I like that as a metaphor.
Someone else who was perhaps unsurprisingly very positive about the Chancellor's speech was the Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, who, unfortunately for him, I shoved my phone in his face as we were heading out. And here's what he had to say. What are your thoughts on the speech?
Oh, I think it hit all the right notes that people wanted to hear. The hall was lifted. What was it? No return to austerity. I think that's what I wanted to hear. So, yeah, great speech, just what we needed.
Did it have that optimism that we've been looking for so far from Labour?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it's moved things forward. Obviously, there are challenging times. We all get that. But I think it did move things forward. I think it lifted some clouds, and I think it got people thinking about the budget now. We're not going to be unrealistic as mayors. We're not going to send in endless shopping lists that aren't doable. Actually, what we're able to do with devolution is get more for public money, because we can join the dots and we can make public money go further. So, yeah, it's about realistic but optimistic, and I think she hit that note perfectly.
Very positive there. But I have to say, in the media pen, where I guess it was the most subdued view, there was a feeling that she delivered it well. Some people didn't like the smiling, but in fact there was very little content. In your room, in the overflow, how did it go down there?
Also really well. So one of the things that surprised me about the overflow room, which was about a quarter full, and it was absolutely vast, was she still got multiple standing ovations, and she's not even in the room, she's just on a screen. And I thought that was very telling. People literally got to their feet at some of those sort of rousing crescendos, and I think I get the sense that the vibe in the conference hall of the Overflow Auditorium was better than in the media pen.
Yeah, it was pretty subdued, to be honest. No one thought it was terrible, and maybe this is a sign of how cynical we are in the media, but
journalists are very cynical.
No one thought it was bad, but I think there was a feeling it sort of lacked content. Some people found the grinning uncomfortable and fake. I didn't personally. Actually, I thought at the top she just looked like she was having a great time and was so happy to be there. There was some groaning scepticism at the constant repetition of that line. That is the Britain we're building. That is the Britain I believe in. I thought it was a good line the first time I heard it, maybe the second and the third, but it did grate a bit. But I have to say, what stood out for me, the same as Andrew really, the positivity. She was really feisty at times, but I just loved the opening. This real strong feminist opening saying there should be no ceiling of ambition for our daughters and our granddaughters. And I haven't seen, well, she's the first female Chancellor, so we won't have seen that before, but it was really punchy.
I thought it was great that she started by drawing attention to that and kind of reminding everyone how historic it is that she's in that position in the first place. I mean, because we kind of knew that Labour were going to win the election, we've had months of speculation, and then we had the election, and then it all sort of started to get a bit tricky very quickly. I think we did sort of miss the moment, miss the significance of the first female Chancellor, and good for her for making that the thing to build off the start of her speech and pointing out that actually it's a massive achievement. And I think it wasn't just the beginning of the speech, that the slightly feminist angle kind of wound all the way through it when she was talking about daughters and granddaughters and a better future and what we want for our children. She was kind of taking that narrative of building on what's come before in order to make progress, and I found that very uplifting and very positive. And to that to smiling, I thought the smiling was really important. Now, maybe if you were watching it on a very small screen, it might have looked a bit weird, I don't know, but it wasn't just that she looked like she was smiling, she sounded like she was smiling.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
And these are clips that are going to get played on the radio, and people are going to hear the positivity in her voice, and it's a real, quite literal change of tone.
What did you think that immediately after that really positive opening, she was grinning from ear to ear, strong woman, first Chancellor ever, but in 800 years of male Chancellors, to then go to slagging off the Tories and their record? It struck me as a really weird key change.
That was a bit in the speech that didn't really seem to fit.
I agree.
And I think that sort of speaks to the fact that Labour are trying to do two things at the moment. They're trying to build the hope and optimism for the positive business case and investment, to sort of say to businesses, come and invest here, we're stable now, we've got a plan for the future, 5 years, 10 years, decade renewal, all of that. And at the same time, they're trying to blame all the difficult decisions they have to make on the Tories, which I think goes towards Morgan McSweeney's 2029 strategy, already looking ahead to how they're going to fight the next election. And I think those two strategies, they're not quite incompatible, but they do sort of grate with each other.
Well, she did say at one point, it was strong, got a big round of applause, never forget what the Conservatives did. And I think we're going to keep hearing that from Labour, aren't we? Because, as you say, the strategy going forward is going to be both a positive one, what they're going to do, but don't forget how much they messed up the country.
And she also made a huge point of focusing on Conservative failures, specifically on business.
Yeah.
So talking about Liz Truss, whose the mini budget, Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget was 2 years ago today. I'd missed that anniversary. I hadn't realised the significance of this date.
I'm surprised that's not there in the Cunliffe diary.
It should be. You know what? From now on, it will be. And also Boris Johnson's expletive ridden what we can do about business. His phrase there. So
F business.
Indeed. Very tactfully put, Hannah. But I think the point which she was really trying to make was any idea that people might have that the Conservatives are the natural party of business, leave that assumption now and never ever return to it.
And then reeled off a couple of things that Labour won't be doing or have scrapped under the decadence of the last Conservative government. So scrapping of a £40 million private helicopter contract for Rishi Sunak, and then a really huge round of applause for a commitment to appointing a COVID corruption commissioner
To get the money back.
Is that a gimmick?
So I think it's definitely something that Labour wants to look into, because there's a lot of wasted money there, and if they could claw back even a fraction of it, then that would be immensely helpful. The reason the Conservatives wasn't because, as Rachel Reeves implied, they didn't care about it and they didn't want to. It was because it was deemed too difficult and too complicated. So I think Labour may run into the same sort of struggles when they try and do that. But yeah, that was one of the things that got a standing ovation in the overflow room.
I was actually quite surprised at how loud the cheers and the applause were, because it didn't seem to have been dented in any way, from my perspective, by the last week or so of freebies and donations row.
Well, I think it's something that we often forget is that while Westminster, the bubble has moved on from COVID, the country hasn't, and we saw that in the election with how angry people still were about Boris Johnson and Partygate. So it's clear that things like COVID corruption and those dodgy contracts and PP and all of that still has the potential to really elicit a very strong emotional response.
She didn't dodge the things that have made this government unpopular so far. Like, she tackled it head on, didn't she? This scrapping of the winter fuel allowance for the vast majority of pensioners. Brave?
I think necessary. I think if she hadn't done that, that would have been the headline. Doesn't even mention it. She didn't mention clothes and Arsenal tickets or any of that stuff. But she did talk about the winter fuel allowance in the context of one of the hard decisions that she'd have to make. But what she did this time, which she hasn't done before, was explain that in the context of what the wider strategy is, which is we have to get the public finances on a secure, stable footing now, so that we can have the investment that we need to grow the economy, and then we can start making things better. So it wasn't a standalone, you have to take this pain for the sake of it. You could see it in the context of the wider strategy. And I think if there'd been more of that back in the start of August when she made the announcement, maybe the rollout would have gone
even, wasn't it?
End of July. Time blurs.
Well, it's because it was largely ignored and then it all kicked off. But yeah.
But if she had done that as part of a wider context, this is what the pain is for, maybe it would have landed better. The other thing she said that I thought was really relevant, coming from Chancellor of the Exchequer, someone in charge of the Treasury, was changing the culture of the Treasury so that they don't just count the costs of investment, but they count the benefits. Now, this is coming on the same day that there have been rumours that the HS2 isn't even going to go to Euston, which is something that the Conservatives scrapped at the last conference. They did, and then Labour said that they would review it, and it's a whole mess about where exactly HS2 will run to. But that's exactly the kind of thing where the Treasury goes, ooh, opportunity to save money here at a disastrous cost of the benefits of the whole project. And she specifically said that she was going to try and get the Treasury to stop doing that. So it'll be interesting to see whether that actually plays out in practice.
I thought even when she brought up the winter fuel allowance, she sounded humble and she sounded like a really serious politician. This is what she said. She said, I know that not everyone in this hall or in the country will agree with every decision that I make, but I will not duck those decisions, not for political expediency, not for personal advantage. I did not take those decisions lightly. I will never take the responsibility of this office lightly. That was powerful.
Yeah, I think you can listen to that and not agree with her, and I think lots of people will listen to that and not agree with her. But you can't listen to it and think that she didn't think about it.
Exactly. Andrew said to you on his reflections, lots of use of the word I. And we got that in the repetition of that slogan. That's the Britain we're building. That's the Britain I believe in. What are your thoughts on the slogan?
I think it's quite powerful, the repetition of those B sounds, which actually came out to other points throughout the speech. She said something like, my optimism for Britain has never burned brighter. So you just notice those sort of hard, powerful, plosive sounds. And I think it works in terms of the narrative. The problem is it doesn't work unless you start making some very substantial progress very quickly. But yeah, as refrains go, it's not the punchiest one, but it does speak, I guess, to the vibe that they're trying to get across. And it kind of goes with the idea that growth needs to be for everyone, every part of the country. It's not just about, on paper, GDP going up. It's about growth that you can actually feel, I guess.
To what extent, if any, did you get the sense that the Chancellor was trying to evoke New Labour and those glory years of 97? Because it was really interesting for me. It stood out that she joined the Labour Party. She said 28 years ago because of 3 words: education, education, education. And then later on we get this, we've changed our party, now let's change the country. Was that a dig at, we're now back to a serious party like it was under Blair and the Brown years?
Yeah, and you definitely got some of that last year, because she had a conference speech last year where there was a little video of her playing. She was endorsed by a number of people, including Mark Carney, and people came out of that room going, we've just seen a speech by the first female Chancellor. And I think she was trying to channel that similar spirit of sort of inevitable competence, I guess is the vibe that I would call it. I definitely caught the New Labour reference with the education, also with the very slick, shiny hair, not a hair out of place. I don't know how she does that. But I think that is also to do with the fact that they won. And I know in the last couple of 2 months, there's been a bit of, we haven't seen the hope and change that we wanted. Have they squandered it already? Shortest honeymoon period ever. But this is also a conference that is happening months after they've won a historic election victory. And I think there was some of that in the speech as well.
And there was also a reminder, I thought, in her put down of the hecklers, which happened quite early on in the speech. And she said something along the lines of,
we're not a party of protest.
Yeah, we're a changed party, we're not a party of protest.
We're a party that represents working people.
Which again was, we're serious, we're grown-ups and we're taking this seriously.
Yeah, I thought she handled that really well. No one came up on stage to throw glitter at her this time, which is a good thing if you think about the security of this sort of place. I think it was inevitable that she was going to get heckled at some point, and she was just stayed very cool, let the security guards handle it, and then came out with that line about not being a party of protest, being a serious party that is involved in the serious decisions of what are actually going to make things better, not having ideological debates that you would find in a sort of student comment room.
One comment made en masse, I would say, in the media pen was, it was fine, she delivered it really well, but there was really very little content.
Oh, there was no content. There was no content.
I mean, has it laid, or what ground has it laid ahead of the October budget?
It's told us what we kind of knew already, which is the budget is going to have some nasty things in it, some pain, some more cuts. Wes Streeting hinted about this in his interview with George Eaton last week. Possible cuts on some working benefits. Taxes are going to rise, not the 3 that she has already ruled out rising, but some taxes are going to rise. But I think there's also going to be something in there about new investment and what that money is going to be spent on, so you can see the whole picture, so you can see, you take the pain now, and this is what we're trying to build.
Rachel, thank you very much. I will let you get back into the throngs of Labour Party conference fun, and we will be back again tomorrow to
dissect Keir Starmer's speech. Not dissect Keir Starmer.
We will not be dissecting Keir Starmer. Thank you for watching. If you like this, please hit the like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode.